Remember the September morning when Gammo bounced into homeroom, his 17-year-old face flushed with excitement? "Hey, did you see the new Chevy?" he demanded of the class at large, almost shouting in his enthusiasm. "It's beautiful. We've lost that. There used to be a thrill in the air, a sense of dramatic revelation, at Detroit's annual new car introduction time." Automakers built the tension artfully for weeks, sometimes by covering the still-secret new model with tarps for their rides on the transporters, more often by painting or papering over the dealership windows as the displays were prepared. Print, radio, and later, TV ad campaigns were timed to trumpet the news. The new cars are here. Wow, whether or not you found the new Chevy or the new Ford, Plymouth, Rambler, Hornet, Stude, whatever, beautiful, you could not remain aloof to the excitement, manufactured though you knew it to be. One year, one car plucked a special string in the heart of George Neville Bard, a dairyman's son growing up in then rural Artesia, California. I was 16, one of the guys decided to drop out of school, and he got a job and, first thing, he went and got a new car. A '58 Pontiac Bonneville. It made an indelible impression on me. He used to come around and show it off to us, you know? Well, I stayed in school, but I knew that the day I graduated, I was gonna get myself a new Bonneville too. The two teenagers would have scoffed at the accusation, but at that particular hour in their lives they were putty in the hands of one Simon E. Bunky Knudsen, one of the ambitious mavericks who stood apart from the Grosse Pointe Myopians of the times. Knudsen was a MIG graduate who had joined General Motors' Pontiac division in 1939 as a tool engineer. GM cycled him through other divisions, but by July 1956, he was back at Pontiac, this time as manager. At 44, he was GM's youngest car division head. Pontiac, by a contrast that clearly galled him, had over the years grown into a torpid old man of Detroit. Its conveyances were sound enough and able enough by the local standards of the day, but as stylish as suspenders. The new manager bellowed, "You can sell a young car to old people, but you can't sell an old car to young people." And then, in his first significant official act, trimmed Pontiacs of their galluses, the chrome stripes that had run down their hood lines ever since 1935, when they were put there by Bunky's own father, Big Bill Knudsen. Bunky had given his people a desperately short lead time, but they pulled it off for the 1957 cars. He had much bigger plans still and immediately began to implement them. For the 1958 model year, he was able to cram some genuine engineering sparkle into his rejuvenated product. That year, all 5 GM lines shared a new styling theme on a common new chassis design. The frame took the form of an X, rather than a ladder, with the propeller shaft running through a hollow tunnel at the point where the X members met in the middle. GM selected the X frame primarily to accommodate coil springs at all 4 corners, although at speed claimed it lowered the roofline without impairing headroom, assertion disputed by some unbiased contemporary observers. The longer, lower, wider bodies, following lines developed on certain dream car showpieces, had a deliberate rocket cruiser feeling. It was the atomic age, after all. Knife-winged interceptors stood ready on the borders. The young car buyers that GM wanted to reach had been kids who had trooped to movie houses every Saturday to watch Buck Rogers and had tuned in Captain Video on black and white TV, and now they had heard Sputnik's then portentous beep. Some of them were also alive to the spirit of hot rodding and stock car racing that had flowered in America since World War II. Pontiac was into racing now, and so to the traditional Indian image model lines of Chieftain, Super Chief, and Star Chief it had added a name likely to excite the day's youth, Bonneville. Available only as a flashy convertible in 1957, with production amounting to just 630 cars. First of all, for its 4th year of life, Pontiac's Tempest 395 V8 engine, the most efficient power plant of all time, was given stronger main-bearing webs, a forged steel crankshaft, and a bore increase from 3.9 to 4.06 inches. Its piston displacement was 369 cubic inches, and half a dozen states of tune were offered. With a compression ratio of 10.5:1 and the available tri-power carburation setup or trio of 2 barrels, the official output was 300 horsepower for 1,800 revolutions per minute. With a special dealer-installed package of cam, lifters, and exhaust manifolds, the rating went to a claimed 315. Yet tri-power wasn't spectacular enough for Bunky Knudsen. He decided his Bonneville would offer not only fuel injection, but also air suspension. Neither was new, of course. Fuel injection had already appeared on Mercedes models, and air springs on Citroëns, and both in comparatively more sophisticated form at that. Even the irritatingly parochial US industry had already seen such systems, fuel injection on 1957 Corvettes and on those 630 Bonnevilles, and air springs on 57 Cadillacs and on GM buses since 1939. But Pontiac was the first to package both together in Detroit iron, the first to treat them ordinary hardware for everyday passenger cars. Or to try to treat them so, in the end, it didn't quite work out. The injection on the Pontiac was the same Rochester mechanical system previewed in Chevrolet S57 Corvette, and the first Bonneville very similar to the Bosch Cagetronic system that is still in use today. It had been designed by GM and developed by Zora R. Kostentoff and Harry Barr. Of the continuous flow type, it supplied a steady spray of gasoline to each port just upstream of the intake valve. Pressure came from a twin-gear pump submerged in a float chamber and driven by a cable takeoff from the ignition distributor. The amount of fuel flowing to the 8 nozzles at any given moment was controlled by intake airflow, which was measured by a Venturi located just upstream of the single throttle butterfly. The Venturi S pressure signal was then communicated to a diaphragm that was linked mechanically to a lever operating a flow control valve. Any alteration in the engine load resulted in an airflow change, movement of the flow control valve, and an adjustment of the fuel flow. With cold air drawn in from ahead of the radiator, the system brought the Bonneville's horsepower up to a claimed 310, still at 4,800 revolutions per minute, with 400 pound-feet of torque at 3,400 revolutions per minute. Additional benefits in starting, warm-up, low-speed smoothness, throttle response, acceleration, and fuel economy were also claimed. Some or even all of the supposed benefits of Pontiac's fuel injection may have been real, but they paled against the retail surcharge of $500 the dealer made $120. That was a lot of money in 1958, and a big chunk of the purchase price of $5,850 for the car you see on these pages. Besides, the injection had been rushed into production before it was fully developed. Because few orders came in, Pontiac had to retain a high proportion of hand labor for the system, as evidenced by the crude-looking, hand-laid fiberglass air conditioner housing that was fabricated to make room for the special air cleaner at the right rear of the engine compartment. History's verdict is that Pontiac's fuel injection was a troublesome system in service, very sensitive to dirt, and also to gum accumulation during periods of disuse. In addition, if the car was not exercised regularly, water would condense in the float chamber and rust the submerged high-pressure pump, which would shear the cable drive when the engine was finally restarted. Nor did every mechanic across the country take the time to verse himself thoroughly in the complex apparatus. Those who did work on the system came to loathe its sheet metal shielding, which had to be removed for many operations, including changing the spark plugs. Injection quietly vanished from Pontiac catalogs after the 1958 model year. The air springing cost only $175, but it was no more successful. Again, it had been forced down the throats of the production engineers before all the bugs had been slain. The system, adapted from the 1957 Eldorado, also used during this period on Chevrolet and Buick models, went right back to the 1939 buses in its basic concept. A small belt-driven, V-twin air compressor mounted atop the left side of the engine maintained 300 psi in a storage tank located behind the right headlight cluster. Working pressure at between 125 and 145 psi was distributed to four rubber bladders, which took the place of coil springs. Conventional tubular shock absorbers remained in their original places, separate from the air springs. 3 mechanical height sensors, one at the front and one at either end of the rear axle, valved air in or out of the bladders to maintain a preset ground clearance, regardless of vehicle load. Today, the Lincoln Mark VII's air suspension system is basically identical, except that it has electronic rather than mechanical valve control. To facilitate tire changing, a knob under the dashboard caused all 4 bladders to inflate to maximum, raising the whole car several inches 5.4 in front, for 0.9 in the rear, according to our measurements. The owner's manual warned against using the knob for any other purpose. It made the ride rock hard, but George Nevillebard points out that it is also handy for oil changes. For towing the car when the air pump would not be operative, Pontiac supplied drawings for making up a set of grooved hardwood blocks that would keep the suspension off its bump stops. Nevillebard's Bon is the last one he knows of with its air springs in operating condition. He has his own hard work to thank for that. It's got over 30 potential leak points, he says of the system as a whole. GM persevered with pneumatic suspensions on Cadillacs for some years, minimizing leakage by replacing rigid steel pipes with flexible nylon hoses, but Pontiac dropped the whole idea about as quickly as it dropped fuel injection. Bunky's point had been made. After all, Poncho is hot stuff. Now look, for 59 we've got wide track for you. Pontiac had certainly attracted George's attention. As he had promised himself, he bought a new Bonneville, a 60, when he graduated from high school. And I've still got it, or one exactly like it. It was my first restoration. He has several other Pontiacs as well, the injected and air-sprung 58. A 63 Grand Prix, also a duplicate of one of the Hummers of his youth, when he dabbled in racing. And an ex-Mickey Thompson 1963 Catalina Superstock drag race car with a 500 horse, 421 cubic inch engine, a lightened frame, plastic windows, and aluminum front-end sheet metal. Pontiac was serious about its image. George is always buying and restoring and selling classics like these. You could say George Nevillebard is a confirmed Pontiac man. He is also, like his father, a dairyman, but he left LA 13 years ago for the San Joaquin Valley town of Hanford. I've got to be able to look out my front window and not see anything. Agribusiness goes up and down, but it's been good enough to George to provide an impressive modern dairy operation, a nice house, and a well-equipped shop for his toys. The 58 Bonneville has been in his hands for about 8 years. It was in very good shape to begin with, and George has meticulously brought it up to near perfection. The engine has been rebuilt, the fuel injection and air suspension, and all the other contrivances work as they should. The interior is fresh and neat, and new paint exactly matches the original colors redwood copper and patina ivory, as coded on the chassis ID plate. Even if atomic age is not your period, this car really is a pretty piece to gaze upon. 17.5 feet long, it can stand a lot of gazing upon. The new direction styling of this bold new Pontiac, the boldest advance in 50 years, asserted the ads boldly featured Pontiac's first dual headlights, which were echoed by twin taillights. There were dual exhausts, two sets of them. Fake ones pierced the huge rear bumper for 50-0 excitement, and real ones were hidden down below, where they wouldn't stain the chrome. Speaking of chrome, the traditional silver streaks may have been gone, but there was no shortage of sparkling bright plating. Tons of the stuff highlighted every line of the body, making sure you noticed the pillarless roofline, the false air venting at the rear of the canopy, the wraparound fighter cockpit windshield shaped the Bucks Battle Squadron rocket shooting along the full length of each side, complete with little chrome diamond shock waves in the white painted exhaust. Why, a person could flash clear out to Mars in this wondrous thing. Pontiac packed a lot of excitement into the interior, too. Knudsen had demanded that a Cadillac show car dashboard design be used for his Bonneville, even though Cadillac itself had deemed it too costly for production. It's all chrome rings and chrome bullets and chrome accent stripes, gunnel to gunnel. Nevillebard's car is fully equipped with optional gadgets, including a sportable radio, which you can remove and take with you to the beach blanket. A one-piece sun visor, which slides up and down on tracks. And a pneumatic power seat, which slides back for occupant ingress and egress and then returns to the preset position. These still seem like interesting ideas today. Mining George's lovingly preserved original brochures bring up wonderful nuggets of Madison Avenue terminology. This Golden Jubilee car for GM's 50th anniversary was equipped with Pontiac's Stratoflight Hydromatic transmission and safety track locking differential, which other divisions called Posi traction, or Posi. Occupants who might have wondered about the absence of side chassis members in the X-shaped airframe were assured that they were encased in a circle of still body. And thanks to all the anti-features anti-dive, squat, and side sway incorporated in the quadrupoise suspension, they were comforted by level line stops. Smooth progress through space and time was theirs if they had selected Pontiac as ever-level air suspension. Especially if they had chosen to equip the seats with optional cool cushions. Some of this comes down to interesting reality today. Perched boldly upright behind the 17-inch steering wheel, surrounded by all the upbeat, forward-thrusting lines, the driver picks up the feeling that the Bon is eager to be off and running. This is a raw young animal, from a time before automobiles learned to be ashamed of their prowess. The engine lopes down the road with easy, muscular authority, carrying the 2¼ tons of steel with seeming effortlessness, rumbling to itself in unself-consciously audible contentment. Given its head, it settles naturally into a gait in the high 70s, feeling perfectly relaxed, ready to keep it up for days on end. This is an open country car, a car for hammering along between the endless fertile fields of the wide, level, innocent heartlands. It is not a hill country car. Despite the effort spent on frame and suspension, the 58 suffers corners not gladly, leaning and howling, displaying interest in nothing but getting up to speed on the straight again. But with all that engine weight up ahead of so little rear tire, just a touch of early throttle is a gross excess. Braking is scarcely adequate, the drums at all four corners being living testaments to why discs were such an epical invention. George has done what he could here, by exchanging the original front drums for ones from a 1960 model. These are a 1/4 inch wider and an inch smaller in diameter, for improved airflow between drum and wheel. The ride quality on the air suspension is curious. There seem to be two things going on at once. The more noticeable is a firmness, a direct and immediate response to road irregularities. In a smaller, more agile car, you'd call it sporty. Yet there is also a long motion softness, a rather nautical wallowy sensation. According to contemporary reports, the ride on the air bladders was indistinguishable from the ride provided by the conventional steel springs. Many ever-level owners, in fact, eventually converted to coils, cheerfully giving up self-leveling to gain reliability. Neville Bard has made one important improvement to the pneumatics on his car. Because the little air compressor shares its lubricant with the power steering system, in the factory setup it frequently overheated. To alleviate the problem, George installed an oil cooler for the fluid, just ahead of the radiator. Who cares? George, that's who. What I'd like to do someday is build up a tri-power and install it in this car and really prove to people the injected engine is faster. He probably won't get to that, because the Bon is for sale. Having had his fun restoring it, he wants to get on with other projects. With its fuel injection and air suspension, plus all its other interesting late 50s goodies, and given its fine condition, he reckons this possibly unique vehicle is worth a good deal more than the $25,000 he has it insured for.